All right, my name is Reverend Sara Lewis. I use she, her pronouns. And this forum is our monthly skill builder for all folks at OUC who'd like to have more skills to use as volunteers here or anywhere else or in your life. And today's topic is making covenant. So we have folks online. Welcome, glad to see you. And this is being recorded. So for those in the room and those online, hello. You are being recorded. We will be posting this recording later. And so because we are talking about covenant today, I am going to request also that any examples that we bring up, that we use vague terms and not describe specific things that have happened or name names of anything. We're talking about how to build covenant. If there is a specific covenant breach or concern issue that you'd like to talk to me about, we can do that another time, not in a recorded open forum. So we begin by lighting our chalice with these words by Robin Gray. We join our voices in a holy communion of mind and heart, dedicated to the promises that bind us in compassion one with another. In this hour, we light the flame that signals our intention to find the sacred in every living thing. All right, and Jasper, would you mind shutting our doors? I think those who want to be here can open doors. Thank you all. So what is covenant? I wanted to start with just a little brainstorm. We use the word all the time, covenant. And what is a covenant? What does that mean to us? So if you are on Zoom and you want to just put your ideas in the chat, and Teresa, if you could put the chat up so we can see it here, I'll read those out. And if you're in the room, since this is a quick brainstorm, I will run the microphone around, but we'll just have some shout outs from in the room and we'll read off what is posted on Zoom. All right, what is covenant? What does it mean? Anybody? Okay.
Covenant comes from the root words to mean coming together.
Yes, coming together.
It's a promise.
It's a promise. Anything else?
It usually involves a group of people around a very specific goal, not necessarily goal, but like community.
Yeah.
It's an agreement between people about how to behave in community.
And online, a group of agreements to ensure that a group is in respectful with each other and follows values. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other ideas that we're missing? All right. Yep, one more.
It's a religiously charged word. Like there's the Noachian covenant, the Adamic covenant, it's a theological term.
Yeah. We see it in some settings, like HOAs have a covenant or something, but yeah, it's usually a religiously charged word. All right, well, fabulous. We all understand so much about what covenant is. I had a couple readings that I just wanted to bring into the conversation about what is covenant. So Reverend Victoria Safford says, "A covenant is not a contract. It is not made and signed and sealed once and for all, sent to the attorneys for safekeeping or guarded under glass in a museum. A covenant is not a static artifact, and it is not a sworn oath. Whereas, Therefore, I will do this or I'll die, so help me God. A covenant is a living, breathing aspiration made new every day. It can't be enforced by consequences, but it may be reinforced by forgiveness and by grace when we stumble, when we forget, when we mess up. So I love that definition also of covenant. So some practical things. We make covenants for a lot of reasons. There's the covenant between congregations that are part of the UUA, and that's the big Article 2 covenant that states what our shared values are and why the UUA exists. There's the covenant that OUUC created many years ago, and recently we added the behavioral covenant to that covenant. And that was a big process of, there was a writing team, they proposed covenant language, it was discussed in congregational meetings, it was voted upon. But many of our small groups go ahead and create covenants just amongst themselves. And there's real value to having a covenant for your team, for your small group ministry, for your book club, for whatever you're doing. There's a lot of value to creating covenant together so that you can make those aspirational promises of how you want to be together in that small group. Do a lot of our covenants end up sounding very similar, group to group? Yes. But if we just gave you a cookie cutter and said, this is the small group covenant, follow it, that wouldn't be anywhere near as meaningful a process as it is to create the covenant together as a small group. So that's what we're really talking about today, is how do we do that? If we are wanting to create a covenant for our book group, or if we're wanting to create covenant for the coffee servers, or if we're wanting to create covenant for the pilgrims traveling to Transylvania, what is that process for how do we create a covenant together? And there's a few things that I think are really important to remember as we create covenant. And those are on this next slide. So the graphic there is the shared values from Article 2. So those are our Unitarian Universalist values. And so we always want to start from a place of our values and also from safety, because part of the goal of covenant is to keep us safe in community. So I would add safety as another value in addition to our UU values. And then you as a group may have other values that you may want to bring in. But there's a discussion of what are our values in this small group? What are we hoping to create in this container? And that is the starting place for the promises. So you don't just start with, oh, I really like this rule. This is a great rule. Instead, you say, these are my values. And then we might get to rules from there. Another important starting place is power and privilege. And I think we aren't talking about this enough in our small groups. In our groups, not everyone is bringing the same amount of power and privilege into the circle. I mean, it's obvious in some groups, like when I make covenant with children, it's pretty clear that I have the power in the circle and the children don't. But in other group circles, we may not look around and notice where the power and privilege are sitting. And that affects how we live into our covenant. If we don't admit that there's power or privilege difference, that doesn't make it go away. It just means that we're not tending to it. So when we make covenant, we could explicitly address power and privilege in our covenants. And that would move us toward more equity and justice. And then the last thing that I think is really important are talking about needs and access. And in any given small group, there may be different needs present. And how do we tend to making access for everyone, making it accessible for everyone? So some people are really good about speaking up for their needs. They're excellent self-advocates, right? And some people aren't. So pausing and checking in about what needs may be present in this small group. It's surprising how many times somebody won't say what they need until they're asked. So that just remembering to pause and leave space for that in the covenant creation process. So I'm going to stop here for a second and see if there's any questions or thoughts that these ideas stir up for anyone. And if you're online and you would like to speak into the room, you can raise your virtual hand or wave your actual hand at Teresa, or you can put it in the chat and we'll read it for you. And if there's anyone in the sanctuary who has a question or comment.
It's challenging to think about how those with power and privilege can facilitate the other folks who don't have that power and privilege. It's kind of like, even by speaking up, being the person with power and privilege, you're kind of foreclosing or discouraging or changing the vibe so that they don't feel comfortable speaking up. So it's really hard to balance that.
It can be, for sure. There's explicit techniques that can help. Bye, Jack. Sorry. There's explicit techniques that can help of saying, would those most affected by this speak first, or like stacked decks where you ask for people who identify with a marginalized identity to speak first before those who identify with dominant identities speak. Or, it could just be as simple as acknowledging that in this group, that there's men with more privilege in our patriarchal society, and we're going to acknowledge the fact that we all swim in patriarchy. We're just gonna say it out loud and then move on from there and see what happens. So it could just be acknowledging that power and privilege are in the room and then seeing what happens when that's explicit. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well then we're going to practice. We're going to practice. I'm going to demonstrate making the beginning of a covenant here with y'all, and then we're going to do small group breakouts, and in your breakouts you're going to create a covenant together. Then we're going to come back, talk about how that process was, and talk about stumbling challenges and what we do when covenant is broken. Sound good? Okay. So to begin in my example of a covenant, we're abbreviating this, so this would probably take at least 30 minutes if I did this right with you all, and this is like the down and dirty version. But first I'm gonna say, what are our values that are important to us in this group? And somebody would shout out a value. Respect, yes. And so we're brainstorming. So I put down respect. And somebody shouts out another value that's important in this group. Inclusion. And then, because I'm modeling here the responsible party who's the facilitator or leader of this group, I'm gonna say something like, institutional compliance or safety or following the bylaws or something that is all about that I'm this like person who's, yeah. Yeah. And then somebody else shouts out something else. Empathy. And eventually we end up with this whole list of values. And we pause and we think about them for a little bit. And then I say, is everyone comfortable with these values, or is there anything we need to unpack further? Is there a value on here that somebody isn't comfortable with and we want to talk about it? And just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to pretend that somebody really doesn't like the value of bylaws. And so I say, please tell us why. Tell us more. And they tell us that bylaws come from a culture of white supremacy domination and the worship of the written word over the consensus of the people in the room, or something like that. And so we talk about it and we unpack it. And we say, maybe what we need to say is that actually our value is that we want to take care of our community, and how this community is currently taking care of itself is through bylaws, but the ultimate value underneath that is that we want our community to be safe and built on strong foundations. And so we change it to it's no longer bylaws, and now it's community on strong foundations. And I'm not going to lie, that process probably took a long time and was frustrating for somebody in the room, right? Somebody was like, really? We can't just say bylaws are our value. We have to do this, and it's taking forever. I only put 10 minutes on the agenda. But if you want to really get into actual, true consent of everyone, and you really want them all to be fully bought in, you have to give them time to talk about what their values really are. So now we have a list of values. And there's probably a whole lot more on there than what we have.
It seems to me it's also a value to accomplish what we're here to accomplish. So somehow that would be sensible.
Yeah, we could have started from the beginning with a value of time management, or that we have a goal. Our value could be goal focus. If you are a team, this is, it's going to be totally different if you're a book club or if you're the finance committee, right? If you're the finance committee, you probably have a goal that needs to be accomplished, right? If you're a book club, you probably still have a goal. You want to talk about the book, hopefully. So having your purpose for existing as one of your values can also be super helpful, yeah. So then, once you have your values, then the question is there anything about power and privilege that we want to acknowledge with this gathered group of people? Right now, I could say I need to acknowledge the fact that I am completely controlling the process and the microphone, right? That would be an acknowledgement of power and privilege. We could acknowledge, disparities in access, because that can become an issue of power and privilege. If you've got people who are on Zoom, hello, people on Zoom, they are not seen or heard as much as the people in the room. So access has become power and privilege. That could also be something to acknowledge. So you could, say, right now, we have an issue of in-person and online. And that's our main issue of power and privilege, besides the fact that I am the only one with the microphone, right? We might come up with more, but, moving on from that demonstration, then the question of access and needs. Does anyone have a need that needs to be present in our covenant? One person online is currently driving. Right, so that's a need. That's a need, yeah. So we've got a need for safety while driving. Yeah. We have a need to use the microphone so that we can all hear. So there's the auditory sound system. And we could name other needs. It could be that we could acknowledge that this group can't go over the time allotted because we have a need for lunch, right? That could be also on here. So then you've now, like, you've just brought out a whole bunch of things, but you aren't really at covenant language yet. So now the process would be to address how do we make agreements and promises to bring all of these things into real verbs. You know, your covenant should be action language. It should be stuff you can actually do. Now, some of that could be super simple. You know, when I do this with kids, we just go from respect. I tell you, this happens every single time. Oh, our value is respect? Okay, the promise is we will respect each other. I mean, that's it, right? Treat each other with respect. The value is empathy. We will practice empathy and listening. Almost always. Yeah. Just translate the value into the action. But sometimes it's a little bit trickier. So if the value is a community on strong foundations, what are the verb actions that get us there? We will agree on ground rules. Yeah, that could be the action, is that we will agree on ground rules. It could be we will use resources with good stewardship. You know, it could be, it kind of depends on what aspect of community on strong foundation. Yeah, how old the kids are, how old, you know, what aspect of work the adults are doing. I mean, if you are, again, the finance committee, this could be, you know, we will tend to data management with future audits in mind. You know, something very specific like that could be. You know, or if you are the board, it could be, you know, we will keep our legal liabilities in mind. If you're the book club, it could be just, we will leave the room as clean as we found it, right? All right, and then the power and privilege, what's the verb promise that might address that? So we have people in person and online. So we could make a promise of we will pause and ask for online comments before we jump into in-person conversation. That could be a promise. Or it could be something about remembering to look at the camera and use the microphone so everybody can hear us. So you take whatever it is, and now you're making it into a verb statement that people can actually do. You end up with a whole bunch now of brainstormed statements. And at some point in the process, almost always, somebody says, well, that's actually just part of that. So those should just be combined. That if we're respecting each other, doesn't that also mean that we're pausing to make sure the online people got to talk? And we say, well, are we going to remember it if we keep it super vague? Or do we need to make it more explicit? And maybe in this particular group, people want their covenant to be super short and vague, but it's almost always better to go with explicit. So then you've got the whole list of things. You've done some wordsmithing. Probably you've done more wordsmithing than somebody wanted to do, and not as much wordsmithing as somebody else wanted to do. Somebody thinks that there's like, they'd love to take this home and mess with the grammar or something. And somebody else is like, I'm done with this process. I'm not a process person. But again, it's important to pause with all of these proposed and ask once again, are we comfortable with all of these? And is there one that anyone would like to speak about further? And maybe somebody says, I'm not comfortable with we will respect each other. Because when I was 6, my mom told me that respect meant a rap on the knuckles. I don't know, whatever it is. And then you listen, And you might even have to get to the point of saying, maybe we need to define this word that we're using, because I think that when I'm saying respect and you're saying respect, we're not talking about the same thing. We mean something different with that word. Again, this is time consuming, but if you get through listening to each other, you will be at a better place for working together. So it's an investment in time that will actually help with that goal focus and time management in the future. All right, that's my demonstration. So now I will pause for questions and comments. And rebuttals are fine. You can tell me I'm wrong.
I have a confession. I came here because I'm looking to use a covenant with my next roommate. My kid is moving out. I need a roommate rather than have a roommate agreement. I thought being a Unitarian it would make sense to have a roommate covenant. And this, I wish that I had had a covenant with my kid.
Yes, yes. Covenants don't have to just be at church. For sure, at home, at work, yeah.
I don't know if this fits into the discussion, but I agree with you that it's a valuable use of time and effort. And whenever you build that foundation of communication and inquiry and establishing who is coming from where, you're going to get a lot more done in your group. So it's really worth it. And also getting buy-in from everybody about things, finding a common ground. Also, another word that I use is balance of power for whether or not there's difficulties for things. And always pointing out there's always imbalance of power in everything at all times.
Yeah, and maybe it's an imbalance that, you know, does a seesaw depending on what exactly is going on. Yeah. I find vague versus explicit very helpful. Yeah. Vague is not going to get us very far once we're in disagreement with each other. Yeah. Yeah. Any other comment or question before we practice? Okay, so we are going to get into some practice circles. You only have 15 minutes. So I just got done saying that like this could be a super time-consuming process, right? And you're only practicing for 15 minutes. So you're not going to be able to get through a lot. You're not going to get to a complete covenant in that time. But just sort of go over the steps in what do we call it? You're marking it. If you were rehearsing for a play, you're not doing it full out, but you're just marking it so that you see what the process would be like to go through those steps. And if you end up with a covenant of one statement at the end and say, and then we would have a bunch of other good stuff, that's fine. So how many folks online do we have, Teresa? Okay, so we're gonna have one online group. An online group, please tend to your safety. We're gonna have 2 in the room groups. And so if you're online, I'm assuming that you can type into the chat to record what you're doing together. And I have paper and clipboards and pens in the room. So I'm going to have a group of 3 and another group of 3 or possibly 4 if people come back. And we are gonna have 15 minutes. So our time begins now.
So how do y'all feel about just being unmuting yourselves in this main room? The only catch there is it is being live streamed to YouTube. Is that comfortable, or would you rather go in a breakout room?
Go either, if breakout room was I could do either way. I don't know if Celia, because I know Connie's just listening because she's driving, so she won't be able to.
Yeah,
chime-
that's the other question, is if Celia is able to participate, or if it's maybe I'll just be your partner here, Anne.
I don't know if yeah, if Celia's okay. Okay, is Celia able to participate? Yeah,
Given no response, I'm gonna guess no. I'm
Okay.
gonna take our captions off of the big screen,
Okay.
at least. And I could edit this part out of the YouTube later if, whatever.
Right.
But yes, I was also inspired to go home and make a family covenant with my family, but my
Mhm.
kids. See if I can
Mhm.
get them to agree to any values. So I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure one of them will have fun as a value.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure I'll be able to convince them of anything else, but
Yeah, but I feel like the way Reverend Sarah presents it, I'm like, that looks so doable. And but like it's just breaking it down to know that yeah, it's nothing's ever perfect, but like for the people that want to chime in, it's powerful. It's probably
Mhm.
annoying for the people who are not wanting to talk about it. But for the people that do want to talk about it, it's like I think it's powerful to ask people what are your values, like, and talk about it together.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear like I've been through this process a number of times. We have a tech team covenant, and there's I've witnessed some of the RE covenant makings and that sort of thing. So I've seen it happen, and it's interesting to hear the reasons behind why we go through this process each time instead of just saying, here's the same covenant we use for all of these. Um, so let's see, if we were to create a covenant for this breakout room, not breakout room, I I think that trying to be mindful of the fact that we're being live streamed to YouTube is one value. I don't know if that's a value. I'm not sure what sensitivity to people's privacy concerns is the value, I think.
Right. Right. Mhm. Yeah. I'm someone who can, I'm such a like person who can spend my whole life like finessing words. So I'm a person who like looks for ways to like simplify because I naturally will just be like, but until a point, I guess people patience has is helpful to realize like, hey, if people are like, it's just I think it can be challenging to wrap things up in little ways or be like, oh, we'll wrap this one up here. We got that, and just acknowledge. Um,
I see that Connie unmuted. Are you gonna add something, Connie? Maybe. Not hearing you if you're trying to.
I know. I,
Unintended. Just a second. I want to mute again.
Oh, okay.
um, yeah. Let's see. I think there's something about that I would throw out something about. It's helpful when people can share what their access needs are, but I know people can't always. But and I guess I've heard on one hand, I want to say like assumption of positive intent, and then I've also heard particular critiques of that, right? So it's
Yeah.
so what would I say?
Yeah, I think there is room for both giving people the benefit of the doubt that they mean well, that their intent is positive, but also being able to acknowledge that impact is not always, intent does not always lead directly to impact, and that it's best for people to be able to acknowledge the impact of their actions, words, whatever, if someone else says something was harmful.
Mhm. Yep. So I'm trying to think of what I guess my first thought is like a spirit of adventure, you know, kind of jumping in, like going, we're trying this. I guess personally, I have a hard time because I feel like respect can be shown. There's so many different ways of understanding how to show respect. That I feel like I guess it's good to start that way, and that way you see whatever best effort is and how other people. I feel like at something I heard somebody say like no interrupting, and I feel like, oh, that's really explicit. I find that really helpful.
I find that a really challenging one to follow. Because I have ADHD, and sometimes thoughts just pop up immediately, and if I don't say it immediately, then it will disappear. But I can work really hard at it. I can write something down so that I can bring it up later. So I think also being flexible, giving people grace when they mess up is a value.
Yeah. And like I said, do you have any that you would put out? Are there any particular covenant are there any particular covenant values that you feel like is a kind of helpful standby? Or does it just depend on each group maybe?
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of a hard time with this because I don't know, the intended goal of this group other than to practice covenant building. So it's like, what do we need to have guidelines and stuff about? Like, is it in groups where there would be intimate sharing, there would often be an expectation of confidentiality and being non-judgmental and things like that. I guess sort of the like allow even amounts of proportional amounts of space for each person to contribute. The one about like, if you tend to be somebody who speaks a lot, maybe take a step back. If you tend to be somebody who is very quiet and doesn't contribute, maybe try to contribute at least a thought or two. Step forward, step back. I think it's sometimes abbreviated as.
Yeah, I think that's a helpful one in general. Because it addresses equity. It gets everybody to kind of think of like their contributions. Yeah, so I like how she said at the beginning, I think it was like, what is the purpose of our group, and kind of talking about that. That's helpful to be like, and I can imagine in a group that's really quite task oriented for project purpose. There's still like being in community together. So it's like our goal is to get this done. And we want it to be a nourishing experience for people. So yeah. Let's see. I took a note.
Yeah, I realized we skipped the discussion of power and privilege, I think, or we've kind of been going back and forth between values and rules and not talking about the power and privilege. So one that I thought of while Reverend Sarah was talking is the staff 5-minute warning to pass along to y'all. The staff congregant power dynamic, which it's kind of complex. In a way, y'all are my boss, but
right.
I mean, You're my boss's boss's boss.
No, but it's true. It's like, yeah, being a volunteer means like it's a whole different level where, yeah, and just, I'm just remembering when I was, there are different kind of things because you can volunteer, but right, when people have expectations as a staff,
Mhm.
and people can experience it from a volunteer role, but when you have a certain role that people can um, expect, well, I feel on my own, I feel like for myself at least, because our society has so many things that are so fast and like Target has this perfect system for dealing with this. And, like Facebook has this really fast, there are all so many programs that are like such high corporate, like a lot of money is going into making things be very commercial, right? And I feel like for myself, I can notice sometimes, like I think that sometimes that has to do with privilege, like being a customer, right? Or being kind of having that um, expectation of like, I'm gonna get something. You know what I mean? Like I'm here to get something. That can be really.
All right, thanks for listening, Connie. And welcome, Nathan. I see that you just joined us. So we're having what is essentially a small breakout group discussion, kind of practicing covenant building, but disclaimer that we are live streaming this to YouTube. We decided not to go to an actual breakout room because there were so few people. And so FYI, feel free to contribute or not, as you choose.
Yeah, do
Let's
you have
see.
anything we were just talking about, Nathaniel, we're talking about power and privilege.
Yes, talking about the potential power differential of staff versus congregant. Now we have a male in the room, so we can talk about patriarchy.
Woohoo, welcome.
I'm glad I can help in any way.
Let's see. And we could review some of the values that we talked about. Were you taking note? Oh, we were supposed to be taking notes in the chat, weren't we?
Mm.
Let's see here. What were some values we talked about, including everyone proportionately-ish?
How are you doing, Nathaniel? Did you hear, were you able to hear much of the presentation before, or did you just jump in?
I heard the sermon, but I didn't hear the presentation. Unfortunately, I had something else I needed to take care of and thought I would be able to jump back in and wasn't able to, so I apologize.
Oh, no, glad you're here. I can maybe I can I can tell Nathaniel kind of what Reverend Sarah went over. Or I guess
Sure.
do you want to hear that, Nathaniel, or do you want to just wait?
No, I would love to hear that if that's
Yeah.
not going to disrupt the flow of the rest of the group. I don't want to.
We're
Oh,
getting a 1-minute warning though, so you get a
Okay.
60-second version of.
so basically, first she said for a group that basically creating a covenant is an agreement, an aspirational agreement of how do we want to be together. And when you take time to create one, it can just build connection. And so she said first, like say, what's our purpose of our group? And then ask people like, what are our values? And it's a chance for people to like finally say what their values are. And then you ask people like, are we okay with this list? Or does anyone have something they're kind of not comfortable with? So you get to hear people maybe sharing one of the words maybe they have an issue with and why, and that in itself I think is community building, right? And you might make
Right.
adjustments. And then from there you build like, because we have these values, so this is what we're gonna do. So you put like kind of actions you're gonna take based on those values.
Here, this is better. I'm just putting the notes from
Mhm.
oh, all right, I'm gonna bring her back.
All right.
But those are the
Fantastic.
notes
Thank you
from
so
Reverend
much.
Sarah's outline.
I appreciate it.
Glad you're
Thank
here.
you both.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'm gonna invite you to wrap up. In listening, I was like, oh yeah, there's there's some good, juicy, but possibly frustrating conversations happening. But still, like, this is exactly where we start to build foundation for a group. So I'd love to hear from each group just your reactions to the practice, not necessarily what you all came up with, because you were picking an example group, but what stuck out to you about the exercise and attempting to make covenant with other people that you maybe didn't know very well? And I'd like to start with the online, I think it was just a pair. So Teresa and Anne, would you like to share anything about how that experience went for you?
Would you
Any
speak for us, Anne?
observations?
Okay, and Nathaniel joined us too, and Celia's here.
We're gonna
But
bring Anne into the room.
hello. So we decided to name it, like Teresa said, oh, you know, you're being streamed to YouTube, so that's just a little confidentiality thing. So kind of naming the explicit realities, I guess, of the conversation. And then we kind of just shared ideas. And I would say, I feel like as someone who believes in this, I'm going to just name, and as someone who's comfortable being awkward, I think because this is it's still a countercultural activity. So I feel like it's not super comfortable because it can feel like I don't really know where we're going. And I think that's part of the importance of the work. Is that fair? Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. Too many moving parts. Yeah, so we talked about, because I made the decision not to move us into a breakout room, and so having that explicit discussion about whatever we're saying here is being streamed live on YouTube. And then Nathan joined us later, so we tried to recap what you had shared. We also, I awkwardly welcomed him into the room with, oh, now we have patriarchy in the room too. So yes, sometimes things aren't worded in the best way. But yeah.
Thanks for welcoming me into the room, and I understand the reference. I take no offense from it.
Nathan says he took no offense. Sorry, you weren't audible in the room. So yeah, one of the things we talked about was you know, encouraging people to participate in a proportionate-ish level. But otherwise, we had a little bit of challenge with, like, how do you create a covenant for a group that doesn't actually have a purpose other than to create this covenant?
Yes. Yeah, so I heard a few things in your example here. I heard the challenge of not really having a purpose. So I heard the challenge of the circumstances, so you couldn't be as comfortable as people huddled in a corner could be because you were aware that you were streaming live on YouTube. And the challenge of a person coming in midway through the process and how to welcome them in. That's very likely to happen in real life. People come in midway through the process. So yeah, those were some real challenges that you faced. And thank you, Anne, for naming it as a countercultural activity. Paying this much attention to process and values and the people in the circle is not business as usual. It's not getting down to the agenda, which is our dominant culture. All right, I'm going to come to this group here. Any observations, learnings? How did this process go for all of you? Anybody want to take the microphone first?
I really appreciate it. Start out, Arlene was handed the clipboard and then handed it to me, and then I saw on Arlene's little badge there it says board member, and so I thought that was a nice way to practice. Oh, closer. Okay, that was a nice way to practice humility. Yeah. Oh, I've got the yeah. Well, and no one can probably read my handwriting. We had a purpose. This was super helpful because I submitted a class proposal about like detecting misinformation online. So I've got a good page of notes here, good starting place, good practice. Something I thought was really interesting was our conversation about bias and how that can balance with other values, and some people don't have the same definition of bias. I really liked, at one point we were kind of talking about how we would apply what we learn in the class, but that's not really what we were doing, but that does speak to something, the values of applying. We want to be able to apply what we learn in the class. So it's all kind of connected. Even if it's going too far forward, we can dial it back and find what the underlying pieces there. I think you had spoken to that too.
So, Arlene, correct me. Part of our covenant was to apply the principles of the church that we're in, the three connecting circles and we were trying to remember what they were exactly. I couldn't remember what they were. But we said we'll apply those. They're part of our covenant.
Arlene, or either of you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's somewhat of a challenging process because you don't have a true purpose. So it's like, even when you state the purpose and it's a theoretical purpose, you don't necessarily have the same idea of how the purpose is going to be applied or at what level it is. So that makes it interesting. But I think that would be less of an issue if you were coming together in a group with something like real.
Yeah. Arlene, do you want to add anything? Okay. Yeah, so those are great, and I'm just going to lift up things I heard. Heard the needing to work on definitions of words that you're using. So you can't assume that communication and understanding is happening if we are using words in different ways. And I heard the jumping to the application and then bringing that back around to how that actually is built into the values as well. So that cyclical nature, a covenant can be a living creation that you keep coming back to in your group also. You could be like, we think these are the agreements we need, and then we do something, and then we say, oh, actually, let's bring back our experience from the doing back into the process of covenant again. If you're doing this with roommates, then you could have a covenant and be like, okay, we're gonna now try this for a week. And then you come back and you're like, we need to adjust some things. Yes. All right, and our last group.
So one thing I noticed is that there's going to be certain things you have to address in any group. It's just the, how much leadership and how much inclusivity you have, and of course the purpose is going to adjust that in different ways. The other thing was we were talking about a book group, but we also found out that the idea of friendships, developing friendships was probably the most important part of the group. So that when you do this process, you obviously will come across things like that you come up with a value that's not in the title of the group.
So we did have an actual concrete type of entity that we were going to talk about. So it was kind of fun that we had a different way than the other two groups did, because we were talking about the book club. So we had a pretty good time talking about it and finding out what things you actually do at a book group and how you want to bring values about that. And you're kind of creating a structure for creating a structure because there'll be like an agenda or a process or a way that we always do this, even if it's just what you always do. If somebody new comes in, They need to know about what you do and how, you know, what order you do it in and stuff, so they can be comfortable and know what's coming and that. So, and I found this applicable for meetings that I hold frequently, where I'm talking with two people, and the idea of creating a covenant when I'm a lawyer and the two people are people who are divorcing each other is a different kind of group meeting than the book club and then the imaginary clubs. And I'm finding it really interesting and thought-provoking to perhaps go through some of this, even though the power dynamics are so different in each setup, actually. Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. I don't know if you want anything else from us.
No, Diane, do you want to say anything?
Well, the book group we were talking about was the OUC Women's Book Group, which we formed more than 20 years ago. And I think I'll take this back to the group the next time and say, shall we? Shall we quickly develop a covenant?
So you can actually take it back to the group and apply it. Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, and I love the example that that came up in this group, that the explicit purpose statement of let's have a book group also had an underlying purpose of friendship and relationship building. So this process can definitely help you find your shared values and purpose underneath it all as well. So I don't have a lot of time left, but I want to now address the scenario that you've got your covenant created. So your group went through this whole process and you made a covenant. And now you're actually trying to, you know, honor it, live into it. And it seems like it's mostly okay, but maybe not quite. You know, people aren't quite always remembering to respect each other, or people, you know, aren't always sharing time and listening. So then I would recommend that you set aside some time in a group meeting for some covenant review and the question of how is this going? And how, you know, are we living into this or not? And I know I'm pointing at a blank board, but, you know, there would be something here. So you'd be like, how is this going? And the group itself may be able to self-correct without having to address any particular person as being out of covenant. Now, in this general scenario where it's just that we're not perfect, so, you know, this will never happen because we're always perfect, right? But in this general scenario where things just aren't going perfectly, going back to covenant is just like a little refresher of, oh yes, we meant to do these things. And group members may bring up, they may say, oh, I noticed that we're not always doing this. You know, we agreed to wash our own dishes, and I noticed that the sink is full of dirty dishes. Or, you know, we agreed to pause and invite our online people to speak first, and I noticed that we've sort of forgotten to keep doing that. And that may be able to just then self-correct back again. It's more like you were on a boat and you were headed toward the covenant. But somehow like you just got off a little bit, and if you self-correct, you can just redirect the boat. But sometimes somebody is just out of covenant. And that's where I would direct you back to a managing conflict skill builder that I did last year, and that's recorded. But there's, you know, if you're the facilitator, if you're in a leadership position in this group and somebody is really out of covenant, there are things that you can try to do on your own, but there's also supports in place in the congregation. So, you know, our OUUC overall covenant asks everyone that if they're in conflict, that they try to speak directly to the person that they're in conflict with, or that has done the covenant breach. So if you feel that somebody is out of covenant, the ask is that you directly address that with that person. And we know that that's not always feeling safe or possible to everyone. So if you don't feel that you're able to address that directly with the person on your own, you can ask for help. You can ask for help. If you're a member of a group, you could ask for help from your group leader. If you want, you could ask for help from Reverend Mary or me, or we have a healthy congregations team. And that's an important team in the healthy operation of our congregation because they tend to our covenant and they tend to us being healthy with one another. And so their whole purpose is to help manage us steering back toward covenant and health again. And knowing that you can reach out for help is something I just really want to highlight. So don't just say, oh, well, so that's just so-and-so. They're always like that. We're just going to have to live with it because we can't do anything about it. No. Yes, some people have more challenging behaviors. And in the conflict management training, I talked about how people may have challenging behaviors that doesn't make them a bad person. Like, say that you talk too much. There's probably reasons why. There's things. And it's not that you're a bad person, but it's still a behavior to manage in a group. So we don't have to throw up our hands, though, and say, well, so-and-so just talks too much. We've tried to put it into the covenant, but they're not following it, so I guess we just ignore that one. Yeah, Arlene.
I thought of something we didn't bring up is who can be a member of the group? If we're parents of trans kids and someone who is not a parent of a trans kid wants to join the group, can he join the group?
Yeah, and that is a good point. When you're forming a group, you get to define who is this group for. And there are many groups at OUC that are defined around some sort of identity or affinity. And then you have to clarify sometimes. The parent group here, has clarified that they're for anyone parenting or caregiving children of any age, including adults. And so it's a pretty vague definition of a parent group, right? And Lush, the Ladies Unitarian Social Hour, has clarified that they're for anyone who identifies as a woman. So things like that, you could set your affinity with some boundaries around it, but as long as you're clear. And yes, some groups are going to have the capacity that if somebody's out of covenant to say, here's the exit door. And some groups are going to have a harder time with that because of the nature of their group. If it's coffee hour, that's not really a defined group. So there's some things that really change depending on the nature of your experience.
One of the things you were mentioning is about when you can't, for some reason, there's not comfort in you being able to directly deal with the person yourself. We had, whenever I was on the board and we were starting out the Healthy Congregations talk about having a group to do that, we talked about not triangulating. And there's a real, there's a real tendency of a lot of us not to have to confront or to deal with when we're unhappy with somebody. We talk behind their back to other people and try and get somebody else to do the dirty work and all that. So I just wanted to mention that concept and triangulating, and yet there is a legitimate time when you do need somebody else to help, but it needs to be the right people, and Sarah mentioned which people those are.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up triangulating. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a human tendency. I'm uncomfortable talking to person A about person A's behavior, so I go talk to person B about what's wrong with person A. I might even ask person B to fix it, but I don't want to go back and talk to person A at all. So I'm like, person B, you should do something about person A. That's triangulating. Going to person B, who you've decided is the right person to bring this to, and saying, I need help. I need help. This is not working, and can you help me with this? Is a different way of doing it. Yeah. Okay, anything from online? All right. We've gone over a little bit on time. I thank you for your time and attention to this process. And thank you. Good luck in all of your relational humaning with other humans out there. I hope this process helps in whatever way you're doing that. And I will extinguish our chalice, the flame of our values and intentions. May they manifest in how we are in the world. The recording will be posted. Next month's skill builder will be who you gonna call, and it's just gonna be the organizational who does what here and who should you talk to if you want to do something. So come back for that if you're interested next month for our next skill builder. Thank you all.